CNN.
And one of those former presidents you just saw at that benefit concert would like to work with the current president, at least according to the New York Times. It's Jimmy Carter, a Democrat, and one Donald Trump has ridiculed on Twitter as one of the worst presidents in history. Columnist Maureen Dowd writes that Carter said he would accept a diplomatic mission from Trump and the White House if he could be sent to negotiate a solution to the North Korea standoff. An interesting idea. Here to talk more about that, Errol Lois, the CNN political commentator and political anchor for Spectrum News, and Jack Kingston, CNN political commentator and former senior advisor to the Trump campaign. Jack, let me start with you. It's kind of a two-part question. First of all, what do you think of the idea overall? And then what do you think the president will think of the idea?
I think it's intriguing. I think it would send a great signal internationally to our would-be allies that, hey, we're doing everything that we can to try to do a diplomatic solution, even including a former president from another party. So I think there would be a great signal in it. The downside would be is how do you control a former president? They're all extreme type A personalities, particularly at 93 years old. And Jimmy Carter could come back with what he considers a great deal, and it's against the philosophy of the Trump administration, and then you've just dug a hole deeper if you've created a new controversy. So I think that would be something that you'd have to go up front, up front and say, okay, you can't agree to anything that I haven't agreed to.
Yeah, well, so what do you think the president's going to think of this idea, though?
I think he's going to be interested in it. You know, I think often, being from Georgia, across the river from us was Governor Nikki Haley, who was very critical of Donald Trump during the campaign, and yet she's one of his key advisors right now. So he is a guy who can bring in people who have been critical of him and listen to him. So I think it would be smart for him to sit down and at least talk to Jimmy Carter about this.
Errol, I could not help but notice that the way that article was written, it seemed to have a lot of tongue-in-cheek. Are we really supposed to take this seriously?
Well, no, I think we should take it seriously for the reasons that Jack just outlined. I mean, anybody who's talked with, I've had the honor of talking with President Carter a couple of different times, and he generates a real sort of sense of wisdom and of humility. You can't put anything over on him. He has not lost a step as far as what he believes and what he understands about the nature of diplomacy and how to handle some of these kinds of issues. So I think it would be great for everybody to maybe benefit a little bit from him. We've invested a lot of money in James Earl Carter to make him a top-level public servant, which he's done all of his life. I mean, I think it would be crazy not to take advantage of it. I also think, frankly, that the Trump administration, which is very much raring to go and has certainly overstated, if anything, its intent or its ability to use military force, might really benefit from somebody who's got a different approach to it.
Right. Yeah, and allows a little fresh air kind of in the room here. Well, I just want to bring up a full screen here that we've got because Carter said that he has talked to Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, that's Trump's national security advisor, and he spoke about, you know, how this idea has been at least raised indirectly to the administration. So I'm just wondering, though, the problem is, just as Jack pointed out, Errol, that what if Jimmy Carter comes back with some kind of a deal and then you're in a bind?
Well, I mean, that's the thing about sending a special envoy is that it's kind of official, but it's kind of not. You know, he doesn't have any ability to make any kind of binding commitment. It is in the nature, when we've seen George Mitchell do this for example, in Ireland. You know, you send somebody who can get some conversations going and then quietly maybe try and arrange some potential deals. I grew up watching Henry Kissinger do this on an almost weekly basis throughout the Middle East. It can be done.
Do you think, Jack, that the president is really going to mull this over and perhaps come back and say either publicly, or would he do it privately with the President Carter?
You know, knowing him, he would do it publicly, but I do think going through Mr. McMaster as an initial, let's lay some groundwork. And to me, the big question would be, now, Jimmy, President Carter, we did not really like that 1994 agreement, which you were involved in and you endorsed. Would you admit that it fell short? And if he's going to insist that, well, that was a great agreement, then that might be a non-starter right there. But I think if they could go in there, and as Errol said, great opportunity for more conversation and looking at it with some fresh eyes and saying, you know, we have a historic relationship between the president and the grandfather and the father.